Today we're making chocolate surprise cookies. And spoiler alert, the surprise tucked under a blanket of chocolate frosting is a marshmallow. These are a huge favorite in my household, and I bet they will be in yours too. So let's get baking. To make our cookies, we'll start by combining dry ingredients. So that will be 1 3/4 cups of all-purpose flour, which weighs in at 205 grams or so. 3/4 cup of cocoa powder, and let me zero my scale because that will be 63 grams. And for your cocoa powder, you can use Dutch cocoa powder, which is usually the type I use, or natural. That will just require an adjustment in leaveners. So I'm using Dutch cocoa powder, which means that I'm going to use a teaspoon of baking powder. If I were to use natural cocoa powder, I would use half a teaspoon of baking soda. I'm gonna add some salt. It's half a teaspoon of kosher salt. You can use table salt. Just go a little light on that measurement if you're using table salt. The grains are finer, and so you actually wind up with more salt per spoonful. All right, we're gonna give this a good thorough whisk to make sure that our leavener is completely dispersed through the dry mixture, and that way we don't have pockets of cookie dough that taste funny because they've got a little too much baking powder in them, or an uneven rise in our cookies. All right, so 30 seconds of whisking usually does the trick. For that, being more thorough doesn't hurt. All right, so we'll set that aside, and into the bowl of a stand mixer, or just into any large bowl that you could use an electric mixer in, we will add 1 stick of butter. That's 4 ounces or 113 grams if we are measuring our butter by weight. Come on, jump. There we go. And we will add to that 1 cup of granulated sugar, and if we're measuring by weight, that is 200 grams of granulated sugar. And once we get all that into our bowl, we are going to mix on medium speed until it is light and fluffy, and that's probably going to require us to scrape down the bowl as we go along. So I'm going to get mixing in a stand mixer with a paddle attachment there. That should take about 2 minutes altogether. If you're using a hand mixer, it might take you more like 3 minutes, and we will see that when it's all mixed up. And here's our butter and sugar, nice and light and fluffy. I did forget to mention that you want your butter to be at room temperature for this particular exercise, or else this won't work out for you too well. And if you forget or you're in a hurry, just very, very, very gently on very low heat, microwave that stick of butter, and it will get just a few seconds at a time, and it will get there. All right, so we are going to add an egg and clean the fingers, and then half a cup of whole milk, preferably whole milk. If it's not quite whole milk, well, it'll do just fine. Don't worry too much about it. And a teaspoon of vanilla extract. And then we will mix again, just until all of that is thoroughly incorporated, and I'm scraping down the edges of my bowl while I'm at it here. All right, so let's give this another mix. And just so you know, when we say thoroughly incorporated, it doesn't always mean smooth. So a lot of times when we add in liquid ingredients to our our creamed butter and sugar, it winds up taking on kind of a curdled appearance, and folks who are new to baking will really be concerned sometimes. It doesn't look right, but don't worry. Once those dry ingredients go in, things will smooth back out. So when we say thoroughly incorporated, we just mean that it's, you know, it's relatively you're evenly mixed in. All right, so now that we've done that, we are going to add our dry mixture in about 3 additions. If we add it all at once and start to mix, we'll get a big puff of cocoa powder and flour all over the kitchen, and that's not really very fun to clean up. So we're gonna add that in about 3 parts and just mix on low until it is thoroughly incorporated. And at that point, our cookie dough will look like a fairly smooth cookie dough, and we won't see any streaks of dry cocoa powder flour mixture in that dough. All right, so we'll see that when it's all mixed together. Our cookie dough is mixed together. It took just a few minutes mixing on low, and I did scrape down the bowl twice during that process. All right, now you can see that this is a pretty soft cookie dough. You could definitely chill this for a little bit before you bake it, but you don't have to, and I'm not going to because I want these cookies kind of soon. So I'm gonna go ahead and scoop this out onto a cookie sheet, and I'm using, usually I make smaller drop cookies, about tablespoon size. I'm using the next size scoop in a typical set of cookie scoops. So this one measures not quite 2, it's about 1 3/4 inches across. Forgive me, I don't know it in centimeters, but I'll put that in the description below. All right, it's a size 40, I believe. And I'm gonna fill these just about full. So these are gonna be fairly big cookies because they kind of have to be to accommodate their marshmallow surprise. So I've got a baking sheet lined and ready to go, and I will just scoop this out, and I might need a little help to get that scoop all the way out. Ta-da, tiny spatula to the rescue. A teaspoon would work too, and we just want round mounds of dough. These are soft, so they are definitely going to spread. We don't want to put them too close together. Err on the side of too much space rather than too little. I have my oven preheated to 350 degrees, and then when these are when the sheet is full, I will put it in the oven, and that's just going to be for 8 to 10 minutes. We want the cookies to be set, but definitely still, if you were to touch them, like soft in the middle, all right? Because while they're baking, we're gonna get the marshmallow surprise ready. So while my cookies are in the oven for their 8 to 10 minutes, I'm going to get the marshmallows ready. So I have large marshmallows, not the jumbo ones. If you just have mini marshmallows, you can use a few of those instead. But this works, it's pretty nifty. So you just take your marshmallows, cut them in half. All right, so you have 2 marshmallow discs per marshmallow, and then they will get smushed into the still soft cookies, and they'll go back in the oven for 2 minutes. We'll see that happen. All right, but just snip your marshmallows while the cookies are baking. Obviously you'll want to start with, if you're doing this with the large marshmallows, half as many marshmallows as you will wind up having cookies. I do like to get these out though before I make the cookie dough, and so you kind of take a guess. I usually wind up with an extra marshmallow or 2, but I also usually have someone in the kitchen who's happy to consume that extra marshmallow as opposed to putting it back in a bag of marshmallows. All right, so we'll see our cookies in just a moment, and they will get a marshmallow crown. My cookies have been in the oven for 8 minutes. You can see that they're set. They're not jiggling or wiggling when I move the pan, but they're still super, super soft to the touch, which is perfect because that means that our marshmallow halves will smush in very nicely. And since the marshmallow is the surprise in chocolate surprise cookies, it's going to get nestled in here and then covered in chocolate frosting. So the surprise works a lot better if the marshmallow actually smushes in. There we go. Back to the oven for 2 more minutes, and then they will come out and cool completely on the cookie sheet before we frost them. Now that the cookies are all the way cool, we can make the chocolate frosting. So we'll start with half a stick of butter, that's 2 ounces, in a microwave safe bowl. You can also do this in a pot on the stove, either way. All right, and to this we will add more cocoa powder, 3 tablespoons of cocoa powder to be precise, and I'm gonna do this, eyeball that a little bit, but I will put the measurement by weight in the description below. All right, that should be just short or around 40 grams, and it is. All right, and we are going to heat this on low in the microwave, or again, you could do this over a over the stove in a small pot, stirring frequently just until the butter melts, because we don't want to scorch that coconut. We don't want to scorch that chocolate. All right, be right back. My butter and cocoa powder are melted together. Not real hot at all, just enough so that they mix into a nice smooth kind of a paste. And now we're going to add powdered sugar. So it'll be a total of 2 cups of powdered sugar. That works out to 230 grams. So I'm going to put the first cup in here. Let's see. Oh, pretty close. All right. And give this a whisk. And it looks like way too much powdered sugar for that butter and cocoa mixture, but it will mix in. And then I'm going to add a little milk and vanilla. See how this is a little bit crumbly? All right, so the milk and vanilla will smooth that out. So that's a 1/4 cup of milk, to which I'll add half a teaspoon of vanilla. All right, and I'm going to add part of that milk, and then I'll add the rest of the powdered sugar. And again, it doesn't look like enough liquid. It still looks like there's going to be way too much powdered sugar, but it is amazing how quickly that kind of melts in. And I'm still over my scale. I'll zero it out before I add the rest of the powdered sugar. I have 110 grams to go if you're keeping score at home. Don't worry if this looks a little grainy, just keep whisking. You could sift that powdered sugar and ensure that you have a nice smooth glaze. I think it'll come out all right without the sifting, so I'm going to forego that. I obviously already have. All right, so zero this out. I will add the rest of the frosting ingredients, and we'll see this in just a moment. All right, our frosting is nice and smooth, and it's time to dollop some onto our cookies. So the idea here is to hide the marshmallow. So I'm just gonna take maybe not even a tablespoon of frosting and just kind of glob that on top of the marshmallow and give it a little swirl. So my cookie winds up looking like it's wearing just a little frosting hat. You can always add a bit more as you need to. And you can definitely do this step much later. All right, the cookies need to be cooled. They can sit there and be nice cool cookies for a little while before you do the frosting part, even the next day if you were so inclined. This frosting won't harden up a whole lot, so one thing to note is that you can't stack these cookies very well when they are cooled. I mean, maybe very, very carefully, but better to store them in one layer. And they will keep, I hear, for a few days, stored in an airtight container at room temperature. I'm not sure if I've ever managed to keep them on hand for more than about 12 hours. So if you are able to do that, if you give this a try and you're able to do that, let me know in the comments how that goes for you. All right, so a few more frosting caps to go, and ta-da! We hope you give these a try. Let us know how it goes, and check back every Friday for a new recipe.